Should Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas recuse himself from the decision on Obama health care law? Does he have a conflict of interest that compromises any claim of judicial impartiality? Those questions are gaining force as the High Court starts its new session Monday. The Obama administration has formally asked the court to review the Affordable Care Act, making it certain a ruling will come in the middle of next year's presidential election. In a statement, the Justice Department placed the health care law in line with other historic legislative achievements. Quote, "Throughout history, there have been similar challenges to other landmark legislation such as Social Security Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and all of those challenges failed. We believe the challenges to the Affordable Care Act will also ultimately fail and that the Supreme Court will uphold the law," end of quote. The coming frenzy over health care is only heightened by questions swirling around Thomas. As we reported this week, Justice Thomas failed to disclose a 5-year period, nearly $700,000 in that 5 years his wife Jenny earned from the Heritage Foundation, which opposed the health care law. Thomas also attended events funded by right-wing conservative Koch brothers, according to documents released by Common Cause. Now, 20 Democratic lawmakers are asking for a federal investigation, noting that with high-profile cases on the horizon, quote, "It is vital that the Judicial Conference actively pursue any suspicious actions by Supreme Court justices." Joining me now, Congressman John Garamendi, a Democrat from California. He is one of the lawmakers who signed this letter asking for a federal investigation of Justice Thomas. Congressman, thank you for being here today.
It's good to be with you.
Do you question Justice Thomas's ability to rule impartially on this case?
Well, we need to understand that this nation has been so successful because we have the rule of law. We operate under laws, and those laws are interpreted as to their constitutionality and their appropriateness by the Supreme Court. So ultimately, the Supreme Court is the final arbiter, and we must have confidence in the Supreme Court's decisions if we're going to have a sane and rational economy and society. Justice Thomas has raised some very, very serious questions about his ability to be impartial in this situation. You said it so very clearly. For 4 or 5 years, he noted that there was no income from his wife, when in fact she received some $700,000 in income from the Heritage Foundation, an organization that's clearly opposed to the Affordable Care Act and many other things for that matter, and the various visits that he's had and speaking opportunities and the like, really calling into question his impartiality. And so for me and for the other 19 members of Congress who are saying, well, wait. We have to have an impartial panel looking at one of the most important laws that's come down in many, many years, the Affordable Care Act. Is it constitutional? Yes or no? Only to be determined by the Supreme Court, and hopefully a Supreme Court that does not have at least one of its members with a very serious question of whether they are or are not impartial.
Now, Congressman, in fact, on the disclosure form, he did not just leave it blank, he wrote none in terms of the question of whether his wife had received income. He wrote none. Now, the disturbing fact there is not the disclosure among some circles, but that they are suspecting, and only a suspicion, that maybe he wrote none because he knew it would raise a red flag if, in fact, he reported where her income had come from.
Well, that's a question that really needs to be taken up by the Attorney General and the Judicial Council. That's their question. We've asked them to do that. We asked them to take a look at this. And it's not just a 4-year period. Apparently, it's well over a decade in which he simply put down the word none. That raises questions. Certainly, as a Supreme Court justice, he's aware of the requirement to disclose income and potential conflicts. And in this particular case, he chose to write none, when in fact there was at least $700,000 of income, in this case from the Heritage Foundation. That's a question that needs to be reviewed, and just on the face of it, it's caused me to believe that there is a conflict of interest, and that he should recluse himself from an extremely important question of constitutionality and the appropriateness of the Affordable Care Act.
Well, that's why I raised it the other night, and let's be clear that Mrs. Thomas is not a just someone making income at this, from this foundation. She's a lobbyist, in fact. She's lobbied. We played footage of her actually speaking out against this act. And when you look at U.S. Code Title 28, Part 1, Chapter 21, so people will understand the basis of what you're asking the inquiry on, it reads, he shall, talking about a member of the judicial, he shall also disqualify himself if he knows that he or his spouse has a financial interest in the subject matter in controversy or in a party to the proceeding or in any other interest that could be substantially affected by the outcome of the proceeding. So this is not some of us just seeking some partisan kind of posturing here. There are concerns when she, in fact, lobbied and campaigned against this act that is now going to be in front of him, and she had financial gains, which is clearly talked about in the code of that being the case of a spouse, Congressman.
Well, the law is clear about reclusal. You read the entire section. It's perfectly clear. I don't think you need a Supreme Court decision to interpret that particular clause. I think reclusal is clearly appropriate in this case. As to whether there's been other violations, that's for the Judicial Council and the Attorney General to decide. But clearly there is a lot of smoke here, and there's knowledge that there was a period of time in which he improperly disclosed, and now we know that she did receive substantial income. That income's available to him as well as to her, and I think that's another issue that needs to be taken into account here.
Congressman, thank you for your time. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Coming up.
Thank you.